It's 1934. Los Angeles is a broken city full of desperation. The Great Depression has just broken the economy and in turn the spirits of its inhabitants. People are looking for a miracle, and on the 29th of January, the Los Angeles Times gave them one. This was the story of G. Warren Shuffelt, a mining engineer who claimed he had found an ancient advanced civilization buried right beneath the feet of every banker and bootlegger in downtown LA. He supported his claim with a huge piece of evidence. He had a map of a city shaped like a literal lizard. The head at the Dodger Stadium and the tail goes to the Central Library. And he had a device that he called the radio X-ray. Most cities would have laughed him out of the room, but the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors? Well, they signed a crazy contract entitling him to a 50-50 split of the gold. They watched as Shuffelt sank a 250-foot shaft into Fort Moore Hill. But then, the drill hit something. The city got scared, and concrete was poured to cover it up. And the most bizarre chapter in American archaeology was officially erased. Until now. Tonight, we aren't just looking for lizards. We are looking for the truth that was buried under the City of Angels. G. Warren Shuffelt wasn't your typical cult leader. He was a geophysicist, a man of great intelligence, and you would assume rationality. But he became obsessed with a legend told to him by a Hopi chief named Little Chief Greenleaf, who I'm pretty sure was also in Peter Pan. This legend said that 5,000 years ago, a great fire swept across the west, and a tongue of fire miles wide came, incinerating everything in its path. To survive, a race of lizard humanoids far more advanced than us, more intelligent than us, fled underground to avoid the fire. They dug caves using a mysterious chemical solution to melt through solid bedrock, carving out 285 separate tunnels that could house 1,000 families. Shuffelt, consumed by this tale, spent his life savings building a machine to find them. Skeptics called it a doodlebug. He called it the radio X-ray. The radio X-ray was a cylindrical tripod-mounted device that supposedly used radio waves to map subsurface voids and could be used to discover and map underground cities. When Shuffelt's machine started clicking, he saw geometry, a massive labyrinth of tunnel schemes, rooms, and then, under the 2nd and South Broadway, he identified the key room, the directory for the entire city. Inside, he claimed that his little X-ray device had detected 37 tablets of solid gold. Each of them were 4 feet long, containing the origin of the human race. Now, how could he possibly know this escapes me? But nevertheless, this was his claim. He wasn't money hungry, though that 50-50 split was a nice bonus. He was just hunting for the user manual for humanity, or something totally honourable like that. In February 1934, the drilling began at the old Banning property on North Hill Street. Shuffelt was a man possessed, running around in a frenzy with his little doodlebug. He was calling the shots now, and he definitely was not guessing. At 28 feet, the newspapers reported that they had struck gold. The city held its breath. Many people stood on the hillside, heckling the diggers, waiting for that first gold tablet to break the surface. But as the drill went deeper, 75 feet, 150 feet, things got a little bit strange. The air in the shaft became thin, and the mud coming up became vitrified, turning to glass as if it had been subjected to immense heat thousands of years ago. Shuffelt claimed his radio X-ray was now showing him domes and vaults filled with water, which he had apparently missed the first time around. He was preparing to bring in divers. He was prepared to go 1,000 feet deep if necessary. Well, he was minding his little device, but he was prepared to make others do all of this. Then came the earthquake. In March, a massive quake rattled LA. The city officials, who were already nervous about public frenzy, saw their chance. They claimed that the shaft was a public hazard and ordered Shuffled to stop digging. He fought for a 30-day extension. He begged them, he cried. He told the LA Times, "I know I am over a pattern of tunnels." But by the end of 1934, the project was dead. The hole was filled with debris and concrete, and Shuffled, once the most famous man in LA, walked away and never spoke of his lizard people again. Let's be real for a second. It's the 1930s. Everyone is broke and desperate as a result of the Depression. Shuffled needs investors, so he finds a chief called Little Green Chief Greenleaf, whatever it was, who sounds like a caricature, and most importantly, doesn't appear in any official Hopi records. What Shuffled likely hit wasn't a lost empire, it was a time capsule of sin. Los Angeles is literally hollow. Under First and Broadway, there were 11 miles of service tunnels used by mobsters to move illegal gin into the basements of City Hall. This being the most famous Prohibition maze. Not quite lizards, but definitely some sort of reptile. The gas pockets were another explanation. Modern geologists know LA is sitting on a massive natural gas pocket. If Shuffled's machine detected a void, it wasn't necessarily a library of gold or an ancient city. It was the ticking time bomb of methane. And the lizard shape, if you draw enough lines between the library and a stadium, you can make a lizard shape out of anything. You could say it was pareidolia, but it's just a lot of lines. Shuffled's radio X-ray was likely a primitive gravity meter. It found the tunnels, yes, but it couldn't tell the difference between a 5,000-year-old vault and a 1920s liquor cellar. And it certainly couldn't read gold tablets 1,000 feet under the ground. How did anyone even believe this? So it was just a scam, a desperate man in a desperate time. Maybe, but then there's the 101. In the late 1940s, Fort Moore Hill, the exact site of Shuffled's dig, was physically cut down to make room for the Hollywood freeway. As the steam shuffles tore into the earth, they found things that weren't on the city maps. Engineers reported hitting anomalous hollows, rooms lined with a substance that looked like cement, but it was much harder than any modern mix. Voids that were too deep for prohibition and too large for gas pockets. And then there was the smell. To this day, workers in the sub-basements of the LA Public Library report a specific heavy scent. Not sewage, not gas, ancient mud. The smell of a swamp in the middle of a concrete desert. G. Warren Shuffled might have been a con man. Or he might have been the only person to realize that Los Angeles isn't just a city, it's a lid. He was definitely just a con man. The 1934 map is still in the archives. You can look at it yourself. The 101 freeway, it's still moving. And the gold, if it's there, it's 1,000 feet down, right where Shuffled said it would be, if you want to go look for it. But what do you think? Was the city of LA in on the scam, or did they shut down Shuffled because he actually found what was in the key room? I think it's unlikely, but let me know in the comments below. June 1764, a teenage girl is found in a field outside her village in southern France. Her throat has been torn open, her body partially eaten, her head nearly severed. This is not a battlefield. It's a farming province called Gevaudan. Over the next 3 years, something will systematically hunt the people there with terrifying consistency. children, shepherds, women walking alone. More than 100 attacks, dozens killed. The King of France will send professional wolf hunters, then soldiers, then his personal gun bearer, and still it doesn't stop. This is the story of the Beast of Gevaudan, and the strangest part, we still don't know what it was. Gevaudan was a remote province in south-central France. Today it's part of Lozère, but in the 1760s it was isolated, mountainous and poor. Forests pressed up against small villages, mist-settled in valleys, farms were miles apart. Life was difficult, and wolves were common. People in Gevaudan were not naive about predators. Wolves attacked livestock regularly. Occasionally, during harsh winters, they even attacked people. But what began in 1764 didn't behave like normal wolf attacks. It targeted humans directly. It ignored cattle standing nearby. It returned to the same region repeatedly. And when it killed, it focused on the head and neck. This detail shows up again and again in records. The throat, always the throat. The earliest known attack happened in June 1764. A young woman tending cattle was knocked to the ground. She survived because her herd fought the animal off. But weeks later, a 14-year-old girl named Jean Bollet was killed. Parish records didn't say wolf attack. They said, killed by the ferocious beast, singular. Through summer and autumn, the attacks multiplied. Bodies were found dragged across fields, some partially eaten, some decapitated. Witnesses began describing the animal. Large, reddish or tawny fur, a dark stripe along its back, a long tail with a tuft at the end, an elongated snout, broad chest. It looked like a wolf, but there was something a little bit off. And this is where it stops being just a wildlife story. Because imagine living there. Every tree line becoming suspicious. Every walk between villages becomes a risk. Something is out there and no one can stop it. If you're into real historical mysteries like this, the ones that sit right on the edge between documented fact and folklore, this is what this channel explores. So subscribe if you want more stories like this. Now back to Gevaudan, because this is where it escalates. By late 1764, panic had taken over the province. Parents refused to let children travel alone. Villagers moved in armed groups. Church sermons directly mentioned the beast. And then the story spread, from village to town, from town to regional officials, eventually reaching Paris. And once it had reached Paris, it reached the king, King Louis XV. Now this wasn't just a rural tragedy, it was a royal embarrassment. How could the most powerful monarchy in Europe allow something, wolf or otherwise, to terrorize its citizens for months? The king had to respond, and he did, by sending professional wolf hunters, Jean-Charles Dennevel and his son. Experienced men, experts, they had killed thousands of wolves in Normandy. They organized massive hunts with hundreds of men combing forests in coordinated lines. Wolves were slaughtered in large numbers, but the attacks continued. Same pattern, same brutality, which forced a disturbing question. Were they hunting the wrong animal? In 1765, the king replaced the Dennevels with Francois Antoine, his personal arquebus bearer. An elite marksman, a man sent when the crown demanded results. Antoine arrived with soldiers and authority. In September 1765, he shot and killed an enormous wolf near the Abbey of Chazes. Contemporary accounts describe it as an unusually large, heavy, impressive beast. It was mounted, preserved, and sent to Versailles. Officially, this was the beast. Paris celebrated as the problem was solved. Except it wasn't, because by December the killings began again. Same region, same targeting of women and children, same throat wounds. Now the situation was worse. because the crown had declared victory. This is where history becomes unstable. Some historians argue it was simply a series of wolf attacks, exaggerated over time by fear and media. France in the 18th century did experience wolf aggression during famine years, but there are many inconsistencies. Wolves typically avoid large groups of people. This creature sometimes attacked in front of witnesses. It appeared unusually bold. It returned repeatedly to populated areas. Then there are the physical descriptions. The reddish coat, the stripe along its back, the elongated skull, the tufted tail. Some suggest a wolf-dog hybrid. Others propose something more exotic, a hyena. France had colonial trade networks. Exotic animals were imported into private collections. A striped hyena would match some of the witness accounts disturbingly well. Then there are darker rumours. Whispers of human accomplice, of someone training an animal, of murder disguised as predation. There is no solid proof of that, but when fear spreads, imagination follows. What do we know? Documented in regional archives is that between 1764 and 1767, more than 100 attacks occurred. Somewhere between 60 and 100 people died. The scale is not folklore, that's a record. In June 1767, after 3 years of terror, a local hunter named Jean Chastel joined a coordinated hunt on Monmouchet. Later, legend claims he used silver bullets blessed by a priest, but this detail appears decades later, likely an embellishment. But this part is consistent. Chastel shot a large canine, and after that day, the attacks stopped. The carcass was examined. Some described unusual proportions, large head, elongated body. Others say it was simply a big wolf. The body was reportedly preserved, but it deteriorated before reaching Paris. No specimen survived, no skeleton, no confirmed remains. The beast vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The Beast of Gevaudan sits in a rare category of history. It is documented. Official letters do exist. Royal orders were issued and parish death records remain. And yet the central question remains unanswered. Was it just one animal? Multiple wolves mistaken for one? A hybrid? An exotic predator? Or something more complicated? For 3 years, in one quiet province of France, something hunted human beings with terrifying regularity. The most powerful monarchy in Europe struggled to stop it. And then one day it simply ended. Maybe it was just wolves. But if you had lived in Gevaudan in 1765, if you had walked past the tree lines at dusk, you wouldn't have called it just anything. You would have called it what the records call it, the Beast.
Have you seen this man? Thousands of people have, but he doesn't exist.
It all began as a clinical anomaly. New York in 2006. A patient describes a man she's never met, but who gives her life-altering advice every time she closes her eyes. She draws his face, and then the sketch sits on a psychiatrist's desk until the next patient comes to see him. She sees it and turns pale. She's seen him too. Same heavy brow, same knowing smirk. And suddenly, the dream man was everywhere. From the U-Bahns of Berlin to the high-rises of Beijing, people who shared no language, no culture, were sharing the exact same nightmare. But was it a collective spiritual haunting? Or a glitch in the human hard drive? Today we're stepping into the uncanny valley of the subconscious to try find why a face that looks almost human is the most terrifying thing that your brain can process, and the dark calculated truth behind the man who hijacked the sleep of the world. To understand why this man is so unsettling, we have to talk about the Uncanny Valley. It's a term from robotics and describes the moment where something looks almost human, but just a little off, enough to trigger our primal danger responses in our brains. Evolution has spent millions of years refining our instincts just so we can get jump scared by a thumb with eyebrows. Think about it. We love cartoons. We mostly like humans. But when you hit the middle ground, the stiff movements, asymmetrical eyes, the brain stops seeing a friend and it starts seeing a corpse or a predator. This man lives exactly in that valley. His high forehead, thin, knowing smirk, and those eyebrows that seem just a little bit too bushy. He's the ultimate bogeyman. And why is he coming to offer unsolicited advice in our dreams? Go north. Well, at the time, some scientists suggested that this wasn't a hoax, but a pattern recognition error. You see, our brains are hardwired to find faces in everything. Clouds, burnt toast, Martian rocks. There's a theory called the Jungian archetype. It suggests that this man is a collective image stored on the cloud server of human DNA. He represents the wise old man, or maybe the stranger. In moments of high stress, our brains grab this preset template to give face to our anxieties. But if that is true, why is it this specific face? Why is he appearing to a student in Rome, a businessman in Tokyo? Is it a spiritual haunting? Or is the human brain just poorly coded and it keeps reusing the same creepy NPC asset? Unfortunately, here's where the narrative breaks. And like everything, the horror gets corporate. In 2009, the This Man phenomenon didn't just go viral. It had become a digital contagion. A website had appeared claiming to be a global database for victims. People were genuinely terrified, checking their locks and looking over their shoulders before bed. But the bogeyman didn't have a portal to hell. He had a LinkedIn profile. The man in your dreams was actually a man in a marketing office. His name is Andrea Natella. Natella was a sociology expert and a high-level marketing strategist. This man wasn't a ghost haunting our collective sleep. He was a masterclass in guerrilla marketing. It was a hoax as art project designed to see how easily a fake idea could be weaponized into a universal truth if you just push the right psychological buttons. The patients in the New York office? Fabricated. The original psychiatrist? A ghost story. The global sightings? You get the picture. We weren't being haunted by a demon. We were being A/B tested by an ad agency. So, the mystery is dead, right? The bogeyman was just a pesky little Italian that got his hands on a laptop. Except, after the hoax was exposed, the sightings didn't stop. Thousands of people still to this day claim to wake up screaming because of this face. And this is the most disturbing property of the Uncanny Valley. Once an image is burned into your mind palace, you can't delete the file. By watching this video, by looking at this face for the last 7 minutes-ish, I might have just invited him into your next dream. Sorry. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It has no off switch. You are now actively scanning the darkness of the screen for that heavy brow and fixed smirk. The hoax created a real, self-sustaining psychological phenomenon out of thin air. Andrea Natella released a mental parasite onto the world, and now we have to suffer this man in our dreams for good. The legend of this man proves that the scariest place on earth isn't a haunted house or a dark alley. It's that little gap between what you see and what you know. We like to think that we're in control all the time, but we are terrifyingly vulnerable to the patterns we create in our mind. We've dissected the hoax, we've unmasked the marketer,
But that doesn't change the fact that his face is now sitting in your short-term memory, waiting for the lights to go out. So, I have to ask, have you seen him before? Or, now that the seed is planted, are you going to see him tonight? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's see if the contagion is still spreading in real time.
In 1972, an impossible headline hit the Italian newsstands. It claimed that a team of 12 world-renowned scientists had successfully built a device that could peer through the veil of time to view any moment from history. They called it the Chronovisor. This was much more than some tabloid rumour. The man at the centre of the story was Father Marcello Ernetti, a Benedictine monk who was an expert in ancient music and a brilliant physicist. Ernetti was not a man known for his tall tales. He was a highly respected scholar. So when he claimed that he had personally witnessed the Last Supper, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the delivery of the Ten Commandments, he made the world stop and listen. But here's the terrifying part. Father Ernetti claimed that the Vatican possesses a video recording of the most famous event in human history. And they've spent the last 50 years trying to make sure you and I never see it. Ernetti claimed he didn't build this alone. He alleges that he was commissioned to lead a secret project in the 1950s that included some of the most formidable minds of the 20th century. Names like Enrico Fermi, a Nobel Prize winner and architect of the nuclear age, and Werner von Braun, the NASA genius who put man on the moon. So why would men of this caliber, men who lived in the realm of hard data and fact, risk their great reputations to build a time TV in a church basement? The theory behind the Chronovisor is rooted in a concept that modern physics is still coming to terms with. The idea that energy can never be destroyed. Ernetti argued that every sound, every movement, and every flash of light emitted by a human being is a form of electromagnetic energy. This energy does more than simply vanish. It radiates outward, leaving faint, ghost-like trails in the atmosphere. The Chronovisor is designed to act as a hypersensitive transductor. It didn't transport a person into the past. It turned these residual frequencies and reconstructed them into a visual feed. It was essentially a complicated television to watch the past. But what they saw was shocking. It's an intriguing story so far. But what proof did Ernetti come forward with? Quite a big piece, actually. Alongside his 1972 report, a photograph was released, a grainy, high-contrast image of the face of Jesus Christ in his final moments. Ernetti claimed this photo was directly captured from the Chronovisor screen. For the faithful, it was a miracle, but for skeptics, on the other hand, it was the smoking gun. Within months, skeptical researchers pointed out that the photo bore a striking resemblance to a wood carving in an Italian church. The media immediately branded it a hoax, and the Chronovisor was laughed off as a pious fantasy. But then something really strange happened. If Father Ernetti was just a con man with a fake photo, you would think that the Vatican would have completely ignored him. Instead, in 1988, the Church, under Pope John Paul II, issued a formal decree stating that anyone experimenting with instruments of such characteristics would be automatically excommunicated and sent to eternal damnation in hell. Okay, no fire and brimstone, but excommunication is a severe, high-level punishment reserved for the most extreme crimes. Why did the church try so hard to ban something that doesn't exist? Ernetti was ordered into silence, where he retreated back into his monastery for years, and the Chronovisor was said to have been dismantled. But the story just did not die. In 1994, shortly before his death, Ernetti sent a final letter to a confidant. He didn't recant his bizarre claims, he doubled down. He claimed that the machine he helped to create was absolutely real, but that the team had realized the horrors of what they had created. They quickly realized, by their logic, a device that can see into the past can also see the present. It would mean that the end of all human privacy. Every secret conversation, every bathroom trip, every government conspiracy would all be visible to whoever had the dials of the machine. The CIA's ultimate fantasy. He believed the world wasn't ready for that kind of unchecked power. He built more than a time machine. He built the ultimate weapon of surveillance. It's a gripping story, but is any of it true? Well, if we're going to find the truth, we have to first look for holes in Ernetti's story. First, there's the photo of Christ. In 1972, shortly after the picture of Jesus was published, researchers identified it as a mirror image of a wood carving by the artist Culo Valera. When confronted with this, Ernetti's defense was very weak. He claimed that the machine's reconstruction process sometimes mirrored existing art. Very convenient. Second, there's the Latin play. Ernetti claimed that he used the Chronovisor to watch a lost play by the Roman poet Ennius called Thyestes, performed in around 169 BC. He transcribed a portion of this play, but when analysed by Latin scholars, they found it contained words and grammatical structures that did not exist in 169 BC. It's not looking good for Ernetti. But here's where the deconstruction takes a dark turn. There's a tactic called a double blind. You leak a story that is 90% true, but you include one obvious, easily debunked lie, like a fake photo. When the public finds the fake photo, they throw away the entire story thinking, oh, we've solved it. Was it a secret Vatican psyop? If the Chronovisor was real, the last thing the church would want is for the public to believe it actually existed. By allowing a fake photo to circulate, they successfully buried technology under the label of a fringe conspiracy theory for over half a century. Today we live in an age where we are closer to Ernetti's no privacy world than ever before. But the Chronovisor remains the ultimate mystery. Was it the greatest discovery in human history, or a brilliant monk's attempt to give the world a physical window into his own faith? But what do you think? If you had the chance to sit in front of that flickering screen for just 5 minutes, which moment in history would you search for?
You felt it before, that cold, sharp spike in your chest, when you see a face that is almost right, but fundamentally wrong. You're scrolling through your feed, looking at a mannequin, or maybe just catching your own reflection in a poorly lit hallway. And for that fraction of a second, your heart skips a beat. We call it the creeps, the willies, the heebie-jeebies. Evolution calls it a warning. We like to think that we're the masters of our own minds, but deep down, we're still running on an ancient firmware. It's not as simple as being afraid of a bad drawing, a stiff robot, or a blurry photo. You're afraid because you're standing on the edge of the Uncanny Valley, and it's a much deeper hole than you realise. Right, lads, we have previously broken down the phenomenon of this man, the viral dream stalker that supposedly haunted the sleep of thousands, and we found the truth. But a question that came up in the comments, shout out to Analog Driven, was why did it work? Why did a simple, crude sketch of a man with heavy brows and a vacant smirk manage to trigger a global panic? It's because that drawing exploited a specific tripwire in the human brain. To understand why we fear the uncanny, we have to stop looking at the internet and start looking at our ancestors. Let's talk about the origins of the Uncanny Valley. Not as a robotics term, but as a survival instinct, built on 3 very specific, very ugly fears. The dead, the primeval predator, and the imposter. The first reason you get the creeps is very simple. Your brain is world-class health inspector. For 99% of human history, a person-shaped object that isn't moving right was likely a source of lethal infection. This is the corpse avoidance theory. Evolution is remarkably efficient. It decided a long time ago that you don't need to be a doctor to know that a dead body is dangerous. Bacteria, fungi, and parasites move from the dead to the living with terrifying speed. And when you look at a face with a fixed, unblinking stare, like the one in the sketch, your lizard brain doesn't see art, it sees a cadaver. It sees the lack of micro-expressions, the absence of the shimmer of life, and the waxy stillness of skin that has lost its blood flow. That shiver you feel when you're looking at a creepy doll, Michael Jackson, or a stiff AI model, that's your brain trying to keep you from catching whatever killed the person it thinks it's looking at. The Uncanny Valley is a kind of do not touch signal written into your DNA. It's a physical revulsion designed to keep you far away from rotting remains of your own kind. But the second theory doesn't concern itself with what's hiding in the shadows on the ground. It's about what's waiting in the light up above you. 2 million years ago, we weren't the apex predators we pretend we are today. We were slow, small, and vulnerable. While our ancestors were busy scanning the tall grass for the amber eyes of a saber-toothed cat, a different kind of specialist was mastering the art of sudden disappearances. Meet the crowned eagle. This bird was nature's stealth bomber, designed to drop from the sky and crush the skulls of our species before a single scream could even leave their throats. Look at the unsettling geometry of that face. The crowned eagle possesses forward-facing, humanoid eyes and a heavy, overhanging brow. Features evolved to lock onto a target with terrifying precision, akin to an assassin. When you look at a face like this man, your brain is recognizing the predatory facial patterns of a vertical threat that spent eons erasing us from above. But here's a theory that actually sticks in your throat. It's the intra-group predator theory. For thousands of years, Homo sapiens weren't the only humans on the block. We lived alongside Neanderthals, Denisovans, and potentially other hominid species that looked exactly like us. They were our competitors. They were the others who could wear our skin, use our tools, and mimic our sounds. But they didn't share our social codes. But here's where the fear goes even deeper than a rival species. The most dangerous thing to a human is another human who is broken on the inside. A social predator, a psychopath. Someone who can mimic a smile, learn your name, but who lacks the empathy that makes us social creatures. We've all met someone who makes your blood run cold. Like you're talking to something with a skin mask. There's 1 or 2 in my village, and I tend to steer clear of them. That's what the Uncanny Valley is. It's your vibe check, designed to spot a creature that has learned the geometry of a human face, but hasn't mastered the soul quite yet. So when you look at this man, you don't see a neighbour, you see his skin mask. You're wondering if he's waiting for you to fall asleep, so he can stop pretending to be human. Let's get modern for a sec. We have spent 2 million years perfecting these filters. learning how to spot a corpse, the predator, and the imposter. And now we've taken those 3 triggers and fed them into generative AI. We are officially in the era where imposters are being trained by our own data to bypass these filters. We are teaching AI exactly how to fill in the valley. The This Man hoax was just a crude prototype. It proved that a face doesn't even have to be real to trigger a total meltdown. It just has to be wrong in exactly the right way to make your brain stop trusting your eyes. And now we are building the very things our ancestors spent eons trying to identify and avoid. And I cannot be the only one that isn't too pleased with that. Look, the Uncanny Valley isn't a mystery to be solved. It's a legacy. It's the fossilized remains of every terror our ancestors survived, tucked neatly into the folds of your cerebral cortex. So, tonight, when you're staring into the dark corner of your room or caught in the gaze of a stranger whose smile seems a little rehearsed, don't tell yourself you're being paranoid. That's your survival hardware rebooting itself. The imposters aren't just on our screens or in our dreams anymore. They've spent 2 million years studying our reactions, waiting for us to stop recognizing them.
In 1848, a congressman named Abraham Lincoln stood at the edge of Niagara Falls. He didn't just write about the beautiful majesty of the water. He wrote about the extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America. This wasn't a metaphor. In the 19th century, finding 9, 10, even 12-foot skeletons in the American Midwest was as common as finding an arrowhead. The New York Times even published 40 stories on these discoveries. They described massive skulls, double rows of teeth, and a 6-fingered hands. But if you go to the Smithsonian today and ask to see those crates, they'll tell you they don't exist, that it was all yellow journalism or misidentified mammoths. But in 1947, a discovery in a cave halfway across the world proved that these giants weren't just a myth. They were a nightmare that almost wiped us out entirely. To understand why these bones are being hidden, you first have to understand what, not who, the Nephilim actually were. The word Nephilim itself comes from the Hebrew root Nephal, meaning the fallen ones. Ancient texts like Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch describe a group of watchers, angelic beings tasked with observing Earth. They broke their primeval laws. They didn't just observe, they intervened. They took human wives, and the resulting offspring were called the Nephilim. These weren't just tall people. Ancient Sumerian tablets and the Torah describes them as a biological anomaly. They were born with 6 fingers and 6 toes, double rows of teeth, and they were described as having an insatiable hunger and a violent nature that humanity simply couldn't defend against. In every culture's golden age, myths from Greek Titans to the Sumerian Anunnaki, you find the same story. A race of demigods who were the architects of the ancient world. But who eventually turned into its greatest predators? Admitting these skeletons exist isn't just an archaeological correction. It's an admission that our DNA may have been tampered with by something from above. Between 1850 and 1920, thousands of burial mounds were leveled across the United States. The reports were consistent. In 1897 in Grafton, West Virginia, a 9-foot skeleton was found in a stone vault. In 1911, Lovelock Cave, Nevada, miners found red-haired giants and sandals 15 inches long, a size 20 in modern terms. Then there's the double row anomaly. skulls found with 2 full sets of teeth, a genetic marker mentioned in ancient texts across 3 different continents. These weren't tall humans, they were something else. And the Smithsonian Institution was there for almost every major find. Records show their agents arriving at the sites, cataloguing the remains and shipping them back to DC for analysis. And that is where the trail goes cold. They call it Building 10, a black hole for history. The official story is that these bones were fragile and crumbled to dust. But why would the premier scientific body on Earth lose the most important archaeological evidence in human history? To answer that, we have to look at what was found in 1947. While the Smithsonian was busy scrubbing the American record, a shepherd boy in Palestine threw a rock into a cave and heard pottery shatter. He had found the Dead Sea Scrolls, but buried among the scripture was a document so terrifying it was suppressed further for decades. The Book of Giants. This text doesn't describe the Nephilim as wise ancient aliens or gods. It describes them as a biological monster. It claims these hybrids had appetites the earth couldn't sustain. According to the scrolls, they consumed hundreds of thousands of pounds of meat daily. When the livestock ran out, they turned on the animals. When the animals ran out, they turned on humanity. The 1947 scrolls describe a world of total ecological collapse. We weren't the masters of the ancient world, we had become livestock. The Great Flood, mentioned in nearly every ancient culture, wasn't just a random act of God. According to these texts, it was a global system reset, a desperate measure to stop a predator that was literally eating the world alive. But we have to look at the rational wall, because for every giant skeleton, there's a giant skeptic with a shovel. And we have to be honest about the facts. First, the Lincoln quote. Skeptics will argue Lincoln was looking at mastodon bones. In 1848, farmers often found mammoth femurs, and because they lacked a full skeleton to compare them to, they assumed that they were giant people. Second, the Smithsonian cover-up. They aren't necessarily hiding giants to protect Darwinism. They're following NAGPRA. Since 1990, federal law has required museums to return Native American remains to their tribes for burial. If the Smithsonian lost the bones, it's often because they were returned and reburied away from public view. Third, the teeth. Double rows are often just the impacted wisdom teeth, or extreme wear from diet of stone ground grain, which makes the jawbone look like it has a second row of teeth. So, it's all just a big misunderstanding, right? Bad science, mammoth bones, case closed. Except for one detail the Smithsonian can't explain. In 1881, field reports from the Smithsonian's own Bureau of Ethnology, their agent, Peter Bunzel, reported finding a skeleton in an Ohio mound that was so large that the skull could fit over a man's head like a helmet. If it was a mammoth, Bunzel, a trained field agent, would have known the difference. The Smithsonian isn't hiding the bones because they're afraid of the Bible. They're hiding them because the 1947 scrolls were right. These beings weren't just big, they were genetic anomaly. And admitting they existed means admitting that humanity was once almost erased by something we couldn't fight. History is a story written by a select group of people, but the Earth has a way of holding on to its truth. If the accounts from the 1800s are real and the 1947 scrolls are accurate, then the giants aren't just a myth. But I want to hear from you. Why do you think that the Smithsonian is so quick to label these as hoaxes? Is it scientific integrity, or is there something in Building 10 that would change our understanding of humans forever?
Look around your room, right now. Don't just glance, scrutinize it. If something was missing, not just gone, but completely erased from your memory, how would you ever know? Think about it. We rely on our brains to be the objective narrators of our lives. But your brain isn't a camera, it's a filter. There's a phenomenon where people find extra sets of keys they don't recognize, clothes that don't fit anyone in the house, or empty chairs at dinner tables they swear were always full. We call it the gap. In the mystery community, it's often linked to the Mandela effect, but with a dark predatory twist. It's called sensory erasure. And today, we're investigating the False Hydra effect, the disturbing evidence that we are living alongside something we literally cannot see. Something that isn't hiding in the shadows, but hiding in the very way you process reality. Lads, let's be real for a second. Have you ever Googled, where did I leave my, followed by something you felt you'd never lose? Because I have. I lost my Mario 64 DS cartridge when I was like 8, so I went on the internet to try find it. The forums told me to check behind my radiator, but obviously I didn't find it. Looking back, that's why I made this video, because that feeling of knowing something existed, but the world telling you it didn't, it stays with you. Maybe the Hydra just loves a bit of bomb on battlefield. But to understand this, we have to first look at an unlikely source, a tabletop gaming concept that escaped into the real world. The False Hydra is a creature that doesn't just kill its victims, it sings to them. But it isn't a melody you can hum, it emits a constant ultrasonic hum, a blind song that acts as a perceptual filter. Your brain hears the frequency and decides to categorize the creature as background noise. It could be standing in your hallway, its pale, multi-headed neck towering over your bed. But as long as it's singing, your mind will simply edit it out of your field of vision. Imagine the horror of that. You aren't blind, your eyes are seeing it. Your retinas are capturing the light bouncing off its skin, but your frontal lobe looks at that data and says, nothing there, move on. In the stories, you don't notice the monster, you notice the symptoms first. You wonder why your town has 1 million mattress stores, but only 3,000 people. You wonder why your phone has a contact named Mom2, but the call logs are completely empty, no messages. You notice the strange, muddy footprints leading from the front door to a corner of the living room, where nothing is there. This is where fiction ends and where the real world reports of sensory erasure begin. Because the Hydra is a game mechanic, but the blind song is a documented neurological reality. Let's look at some of the disturbing case studies that keep me up at night. These aren't ghost stories per se, they're real accounts of the gap manifesting itself in physical reality. Okay. So the first one I want to look at is the Oregon wardrobe. In 2014, a woman who lived alone for nearly a decade in a remote part of Oregon discovered a heavy, expensive winter coat in the back of her closet. It wasn't her size, it wasn't her style, but when she held it, she felt a wave of grief so thick she couldn't breathe. It smelled like a specific cologne, something woody and sharp that she found vaguely comforting. She had no record of a boyfriend, no memory of a brother, no photos of anyone but herself. And yet, the coat was worn at the elbows. It had been used for years. Was she living a life with someone that her brain simply refused to acknowledge? Or did the blind song take him and leave only the woolen coat behind? The second one is called The Third Plate. This one's a little bit more recent. In 2019, a group of 4 friends at a diner in Ohio realized that there was an untouched meal, a burger and fries, and a half-full glass of water at their table. But none of them could remember who sat there. They laughed at it first, thinking they'd just sat at a dirty table by mistake. But when they asked the waitress for the check, she was visibly shook and confused. She looked at the 4 of them and said, "I just served the 5 of you. Where's your friend?" But there were only 4 people. No one had left the table. No one had gone to the bathroom. They checked the security footage. The footage showed the 4 friends talking, an empty chair. But the burger on the plate had disappeared bite by bite, as if an invisible mouth was consuming it. If you can't see a predator, you can't run. And then if you can't remember the victim, you'll never seek the answers. Let's get grounded for a second. Why does the human brain do this? How is it even possible without using some sort of magic? Well, psychologists call it inattentional blindness. Your brain processes roughly 11 million bits of information every single second, but your conscious mind is only aware of about 40. That is a staggering amount of data to lose. Your brain is a master at editing, unlike me. It deletes irrelevant data to keep you from losing your mind. It's why you don't feel the socks on your feet after 10 minutes, and it's why you don't see your own nose even though it's always in your field of vision. What happens when the data deletes a person? If you experience a trauma so profound or a frequency so disruptive that your mind cannot process it, it doesn't just bury the memory, it erases it completely, and the context. You look at a photo of your childhood, see a gap in the lineup where something or someone should be, and your brain tells you, well, nothing was there, move on. But the feeling, that hollow, itchy sensation in your chest remains. That is the Hydra's song. It's a phantom limb of your soul. And this is where it gets dangerous. Much like the This Man Panics of the early 2010s, videos on the channel, this phenomenon relies on social contagion. Once I tell you about the False Hydra, you will start looking for it. And that's a double-edged sword of awareness. By learning about the blind song, you're effectively going to try to tune your ears to a frequency that you were never meant to hear. Tonight, you'll check the passenger seat of your car. You'll wonder why there's a straight charging cable in your drawer for a phone that you've never owned. You look at the ghost indentation on your pillow next to you. By watching this, you've become hyper aware of the silence in your house. You can hear it right now. Is that silence natural, or is it a frequency designed to make you look the other way? The more you think about the things you've forgotten, the more you realize that memory isn't a recording. It's the story you're telling yourself to hide the holes in the fabric of your life. You're an unreliable narrator. We like to think that we're the protagonists of our own lives. We like to believe that we'd notice if the person right next to us vanished into thin air. But the False Hydra theory suggests a terrifying alternative. That the world is a jigsaw puzzle with hundreds of missing pieces, and we've all simply convinced ourselves that these missing pieces are just part of the design. The blind song is playing right now. It's the hum of your refrigerator. It's the static between the radio stations. It's the white noise you're using to fall asleep. But before you go to bed tonight, do a quick inventory. Don't just trust your feelings, trust maths. Count your toothbrushes. Look at your family photos and count the hands on the shoulders. If you find a gap, a stray hand or an extra set of keys, don't try to fill in the silence, because some things are forgotten for a reason. Because the only thing worse than forgetting the monster is when you finally see it. I'm curious now, have you ever noticed this phenomena? Or have you ever simply Googled where something you lost is gone? Let me know below. And subscribe if you're brave enough to leave the sleepwalkers and own the narrative. Good luck.